Welcome back again to the Canadian Immigration Institute. I'm here with my co-host, Chanelle. Chanelle, how you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you, Mark?
Good. Well, I'm feeling actually kind of anxious because there's a lot of people out there who are planning to go to school in January, and we're recording this early September, and they haven't submitted their study permit applications yet. So the question that we're going to be answering today in this video is why you must apply now for your study permit. So what's the big deal, Chanelle? Like, seriously, like, what's the big deal? Why? Everybody has been asking, what's a good time, but why must you apply now?
Study permits take a lot longer than you would expect. So I guess the key thing to firstly note is you've got processing times, which have been very slow throughout the pandemic and still haven't really picked up. So keeping that in mind, but also the whole application process takes longer than you would expect. And you just don't want to leave it to chance. You don't want your study permit to be approved the day before your course is meant to start and then you're not able to get there in time. Planning ahead really is key. And we would recommend that you do your study permit application at least 5 months in advance to allow yourself more than enough time to hopefully have it approved. There are high numbers of rejections, so there's also a chance you might have to resubmit if it's not successful the first time. And then also allow yourself time to move to Canada.
And just like we've talked about in previous videos, there is an awesome blog post associated with this one called "When Do You Need to Apply for a Study Permit to Get It in Time?" And so we will go over the high points, but definitely go and check this out, because if you want to get in for the January 2023 intake right here, you had better get moving right away. And like Chanelle said, the reality is we have a number of third-party entities, others that you don't have control over with respect to timing, in addition to the stuff you need to get sorted out yourself. So take a look at the blog post, definitely read it. And in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to try to hit on the high points and just give you a little bit of a push to get moving right away. So this whole world of study permits, you've kind of hit on it just a little bit, Chanelle. But when I think about navigating through it, I've done videos in the past on the advanced analytics that they use, all of these systems to allow officers to process many applications as quickly as possible, just because of the high volumes that they're having to deal with. And like you astutely pointed out, even when you do things 100% right, it can result in a refusal. And if you leave it to the last minute, then you may not have time to apply again. So I don't know if you have any other insight in the most recent times that we've been pumping out study permit applications within the office, but this world of study permits, like, what do people have to understand?
Getting it right. I think getting it right the first time is key. If you don't get it right, you get a refusal, you can apply again, but it makes it that little bit more difficult. And the more refusals you get, the less likely it is that it will ever be approved. And then second to that, getting it in time. I've had multiple clients recently who came to me when it was already almost a little bit too late. And although their study permits were successful, they were approved too close to their start date or after their start date, and they had to defer their course, which for many people is not a big deal. But if you have career plans, aspirations, a family you want to provide for, then pushing back your studies by 6 or 12 months can really shake things up for you and can really interfere with that plan. So it is better to just be prepared, plan ahead, and then hopefully everything will go smoothly.
Yes. All right. When then, Chanelle? When should you apply?
We recommend at least 5 months in advance. That might seem like a very long time, almost half a year, but that really is enough time normally for the application to be processed. You should always keep an eye on processing times. Currently, they are saying 12 weeks for applicants outside of Canada, and in most cases, it is taking that full 12 weeks. There are cases where it takes longer than that if you've got a more complex application.
Let's take a look at it right now, Chanelle. I'm always curious when I'm doing this to see where things are at. So let's take a look at study permits. And
they
so
can
study
change
permit from outside Canada here, get processing times. And this is the frustrating part, right? Because for other work permits and things like that, the processing times are listed based on country, but right now they're not. So 12 weeks can be all over the map. Theoretically, that would be great. And you can see this was last updated September the 6th, but my goodness, like this, I do not trust this. I really don't. So you add that on. And if you're coming from a country like India, where there are many, many people applying, it could very well be more than this, because this is the average for all over the world.
Yeah, you don't want to risk it. There are clients we've had who've been approved very quickly, but that's not everyone. I've also had clients who've taken longer than the 12 weeks, and it's case by case. Even if you're coming from a country where there are low application numbers and you expect it to be processed quickly, don't take the risk. Just get your application in nice and early, and then at least you confidently know in advance that you've got everything organized and you're set to start your studies. You can buy your textbooks, you can find yourself somewhere to live, and you can plan to make the move to Canada.
Yeah. And I guess this third little heading fits into the second one, but why you should apply now. There's a whole ripple effect that occurs, like you've identified, if you wait too late. Not only are you rushed and you're stressed and you're trying to collect information, let's face it, your education plan, the purpose of study, that thing is super, super important. And it takes time and effort to do it right. And what I see very frequently is people are rushing and they're just trying to get the application submitted. And yes, they submit the bare bones, the minimum of what IRCC asks for. But then they're quite surprised when they get a refusal. So what are your thoughts on that?
It definitely is worth taking the time to get it right. So I've seen plenty of applicants who've been declined in the past when they technically did provide all the information IRCC wants to see, but they didn't provide it in enough detail. The application is sometimes a little bit sloppy because it was rushed. They didn't provide evidence of the things that they were claiming in their study plan. And therefore, the officer just had some questions or wasn't sure on one item, and that is enough for them to decline the application. The officers have a huge stack of study permits on their desks, and it's easier for them to just decline one than to take the time to investigate it further. So that's what they do. They decline them.
Absolutely. So and the onus is on the applicant, right? It's their job to make the decision of the officer as easy as possible. And if they're not including something, the officers will not come back and say, hey, I noticed you forgot to submit something. It's way easier, like you said, to cut through those massive backlogs of applications by just refusing for being incomplete. And we see that a lot. And also people sometimes when they're rushing through their forms, and especially the statutory information sections where they're asking about prior visa refusals, sometimes people will forget, they will rush through the filing because they can't remember all the addresses that they lived at or what they did in their history. And that can come back to bite you later with misrepresentation when you realize, oh my goodness, I forgot this and I forgot that thing. And it seems like with our reconsideration requests and when clients reach out to us when they have a request for additional information from IRCC, then we start looking at it and they realize, oh my goodness, I didn't complete my study permit application, with all of the information that now I need to rely on in the PR, and it can come back and cause problems. So the more time you can give you, especially for us too, then it gives us a lot more time to work with you carefully to make sure that you are putting forward the best application that you can and giving yourself the best shot of success. So yes, apply now.
I would just actually point out quickly, and one more reason why you should apply early. So in addition to the processing times, that also doesn't take into account the time for you to send your passport off. Once you get the passport request, you have to send it off to the Visa Application Center, the VAC, and different VACs have different processing times. They don't release those processing times, so you don't know if you'll get your passport back in 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months. So it's best to allow as much time as possible for that to be processed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. A buffer. Okay. So what is it? Maybe 50% of the total study permit related consults we have are people that are running out of time. Their classes are getting ready to start. Their study permit hasn't been approved yet. It's late. Well, what do people do? What options do they have, Chanelle?
So the options really come down to options with your DLI, with your university or your college. You need to talk to them in advance. If you are worried your study permit is not going to be approved in time, assess your options with them to defer the course. Will they be able to hold your place for the next intake? When is their next intake? Some courses will have intakes every 12 months, but some will have them more frequently, which then it's not so bad. You just have to wait till the next semester. But plan that in advance with them. Sometimes the university or college will make an exception to allow you a slightly later deadline to confirm if you're coming this semester. But that's something really you have to be very proactive in speaking to them about, keeping them informed of where you're up to in the process, and hopefully you can make it work with them. So if you do decide to defer your program, you need to get a new letter of acceptance, and then you need to notify IRCC of the change. So submit a web form, include the new letter of acceptance, notifying them of your new start date for the program, so they can then take that into account when approving and issuing your study permit. The other option would be to decide you no longer want to pursue the course. And in that case, you would withdraw from the course. You would also then want to notify IRCC through a web form as soon as possible that you are withdrawing your study permit application. It is better to do that than to let them approve or decline the application. Better to not have an application at all, so that in the future, if you decide you want to study, you can start from scratch and not have a red mark against your name if you were declined.
Yes. I'm going to share a little pro tip here, Chanelle. When people are applying and choosing which school they're going to go to, you can't control how fast your study permit is going to be processed. You can't. Even in cases where you've submitted it well in advance, sometimes it just gets hung up. Sometimes because of the way you filed or the incompleteness of your application, but sometimes it's completely outside your control. Well, I can tell you that not all schools are created equally, and some of them are downright jerks. In other words, if you somehow can't make your start date and your study permit isn't issued, they will very kindly keep a healthy deposit that you have put with them in preparation for commencing studies. So ask the questions. Have those specific, the specific conversations with the program advisor, whoever you're talking about with the school. What happens if my study permit isn't approved in time? Will I get my money back? Because I've seen people lose thousands of dollars because they are unable to continue forward with their program for whatever reason. Circumstances change. So make sure that you ask those questions, because the last thing in the world you want is to have some jerk school keep your money when you had no control over the fact your study permit wasn't issued in time. So I've seen that, and I just wanted to bring that up. And yeah, not all schools are created equal. Okay, Chanelle, what's the next step then?
Get your application ready and apply. If you are aiming for the January intake, if you've got a letter of acceptance for January, you want to be applying right now. You do not want to wait any longer. And you want to get it right. So you need to allocate the time to sit down and really work through the application thoroughly. You need to write a thorough study plan, which is something you can't just do overnight. Usually there are several drafts, there's lots of information to draw into it, and supporting documents you often have to gather to prove the statements that you're making in it. My suggestion would be, if you're running out of time and you want to make sure that your study plan and your application is done right, book a consultation with us. We do lots of study plans, lots of study permit applications, and would be happy to help. So I would suggest book a consultation as soon as possible, emphasizing the details that you're aiming for the January intake, so we know that we need to urgently work on this with you, and then we can get the process started. But action it right now. If you're aiming for the May intake, I would even suggest getting your application in by the end of the year. You want to account for things like the holidays and the officers taking time off work. Things will slow down. So even getting that in the next couple of months is a good aim to have.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's fantastic. Well, I just want to flip over here and just let everybody know, how do you contact Chanelle to have her help you with your study permit application? Right in the top of our website, and there's a link in the description below. All you need to do is click on Speak to a Lawyer and scroll down, and you can find Chanelle right here, and click on Book a Consult, and the rest is history. All right, Chanelle, thanks so much for joining me today, and hopefully this is helpful, everyone. We'll see you again in another Holthe Immigration Law, Canadian Immigration Institute version teaching moment. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.